relates to your food choices. And I think this is an important one because it is something that a lot of the fit fam kind of shy away from. So, with the IFYM thing, the flexible dieting thing, people have a tendency to just think they can eat whatever they want. And we already talked about the kind of nutrient density side of things and how you actually do have to be on top of your nutrition in that respect. But we also have to look at what actually drives you to further overeat. If you've already got a low level of hunger and you're getting a lot of your calories from Mars bars, for example, and you really like Mars bars, then it is not solely the fact that they are not filling that drives you to overeat further. So it's not just the hunger, it's also the fact that you are kind of overloading your reward system, flushing yourself with dopamine from these hyperpalatable foods. So you're overloading that reward system, and then let's say that was at lunchtime, then you now feel like for the rest of the day you need to eat something just as, if not more, tasty for you to get that same level of reward. Okay, so it's kind of a weird point, but sometimes it can be helpful to not try to fit in quite as many foods that you enjoy, simply because it may allow you to kind of just enjoy your healthy foods a bit more, because you're not actually driving this kind of stimulus to overeat, because you're not giving yourself all of that pleasure, and hence you're not driving that further. But again, like, that's not to say that you shouldn't fit in 200 calories from chocolate because you enjoy it. It's like, absolutely do that, especially if you know you're in control. But if you know for a fact that there are certain foods that when you consume them you can't really control yourself and you feel the need to eat more, then that's when you need to say, all right, I need to actually back off here because it's driving me to actually consume more food. And I see this a lot of the time with people who do change over from a more IFYM, eat whatever you want kind of approach to a very nutrient dense diet, even on the same level of calories. People do much better, not just from a satiety perspective, but also they'll be like, I actually don't really want chocolate as much. And it's like, yeah, because you've essentially removed the stimulus. Because if you remove that stimulus or minimize it across the week, for example, then it's not really there on your mind. It's not something you're consciously thinking of. It's not something that has been registered within your brain in your reward system recently. So you don't have that desire to keep on having that food. Okay, so as a result, you can enjoy your healthy foods that bit more. So that is something to consider. Food choices are not just about nutrients. They're not just about food volume. It's also about conditioning yourself. Okay, you kind of need to condition yourself to want to eat healthy foods. You need to stop feeling like every meal needs to be so overwhelming that you're just like, oh my god, I want to eat so much more. Because that's what we do. We use foods that have been essentially designed to have that effect, like Ben and Jerry's, for example. We consume those foods, and it's essentially this complete override of your reward system, just so much pleasure all at once. And then, do you really think that a chicken and salad meal after that is going to give you that same level of satisfaction? It's like, no, because you are now comparing the meal response to Ben and Jerry's to a chicken salad. It's like, it's not going to be the same. Whereas if you hadn't eaten anything that day, let's say you just had a piece of fruit, it's like, oh yeah, I enjoyed that, it was filling, blah blah blah, got on with my day, and then I had the chicken salad at lunch, it's like, oh yeah, that was nice, I was hungry, really enjoyed it. So food is about more than just nutrients and more than just food volume. You have to think about how these things actually affect your psychology throughout your diet. Okay, very important. And the next point was, what was I going to say next? I've talked about so many things. The next point was actually kind of about not being too romantic about your food choices. And what I mean by that is that not every meal has to be delicious, and not every meal has to be the perfect fit for your macros, in that if you have 60 grams of carbs and 10 grams of fat left, you don't have to go to the shop and get all your favorite thing, like biscuits or whatever, that fits that level of calories. Like, just have whatever you have in the house, get it done with, boom, forget about it, move on. Okay, this is actually one of the most valuable tools that I struggle to put into words sometimes, that I use myself. And that is, when you've got macronutrients left, don't worry about what you can fit in there. Just think, okay, what do I have? All right, I've got fruit, boom, eat it, done. Make the decision, make the call, consume the food, finish off your calories, get on with your day. Okay, because so many people, and I remember doing this when I was younger as well, is deliberating on what you're going to eat for so long, debating within your head, being like, oh God, I don't know what would be the best fit for my macros, what can I fit in, what can't I fit in, and then being like, all right, maybe I'll have this, and it's like, oh no, this is tastier, maybe I'll have that, and then eventually making that decision, and then afterwards being like, oh, I regret that now, I should have had that, maybe I'll have that, and I'll take those calories from tomorrow, and da 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 da. It's like, fuck, no, just make the call, make it straight away. Think, what do I have? Okay, I've got oats, cool. 100 grams, cool. Fucking 66 grams of carbs, 7 grams of fat, boom, get them in me, done. Out the gap, right? That's my calories done for the day. As opposed to going to the shop, buying the food, blah, 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 and it becomes this big ordeal. And you become essentially too conscious of your food choices all the time. And people end up throughout the day being like, how many calories do I have gone? How many do I have left? What could I fit in? As opposed to saying, oh, what'll I eat now? And just eating it, and then be like, oh, that was that many calories, cool, done, right? You have to kind of bring the level of hyper awareness that you have about your food choices down a little bit, and you have to just kind of get on with it without being too romantic about it. And it's quite a difficult thing to do, but something that I think if you can grasp in your head and practice a little bit, in terms of just making the first decision with what you're going to eat straight away, it will really, really help you. I actually think it's seriously understated, and I've never heard anyone talk about it, and I just find it so helpful. Maybe that's just me. And the next point that I was going to touch on, what was it? Oh yes, the kind of more lifestyle stuff, okay? Because we are talking about the side effects of dieting after all. So the first thing we'll touch on is training, okay? So with respect to training, what you want to do is ensure that you are not trying to train more, okay? Because this is what a lot of people do. They get into a dieting phase and they know that they are, inducing this energy deficit, and that you have less energy available. You have less maybe carbohydrates available to fuel your training, to fuel your recovery. But what people do is they'll actually increase their training, and it's like, where do you think the adaptive capacity to adapt to that training is coming from? Because it's not coming from your food, because you just reduced that. So what have you changed? What has actually come in to allow you to recover from that training? Okay, and a lot of this tends to come from, maybe bodybuilding competitors who are using, performance enhancing drugs to enhance their recovery capacity. So maybe they weren't previously taking performance enhancing drugs, but as they initiated their contest prep, they began using them, and hence they have this big jump in recovery capacity. So they go from training 5 days per week to 6 days per week, and maybe even double sessions, and they're fine, they get through it, they have a great contest prep, show up brilliantly, and then that kind of trickles down through the grapevine to your kind of beginner intermediate lifter who was training 4 days per week and now has decided to train 6 days per week, even though he's reduced his food intake. And it's like, this actually doesn't make sense, because you don't have extra energy available for you to do that. Like, it's just not there. Like, where's the energy going to come from to fuel that training and to fuel the recovery? It's not going to come from anywhere unless it's from your muscle tissue. Obviously you can say you want it to come from your body fat stores, but what you'll often see is that initiating this kind of energy deficit and an increase in training tends to result in you having lower motivation to train. So people are not as driven to train because they don't have as much energy, but they're also not recovering from their sessions. So they might be recovering in a sense that, you're kind of getting back on your feet, you're ready to train again, but you're not really adapting to the sessions, and you've got a constant kind of low level of soreness going on. You've got less motivation throughout your day because you have less energy, and you're using all of that to repair your muscles and to perform. You may have lower levels of sleep. You may have a general lower ability to tolerate stress. If you look at things like your resting heart rate, that might be higher. If you look at your heart rate variability, that might be lower. Maybe your blood glucose is higher. So all these things can happen as a result of you trying to essentially hammer yourself into the ground with training because you have less energy available. So what I would be looking at for someone that's starting a dieting phase is asking yourself, what can you actually adapt to? Okay, right now. Okay, if you're doing 4 days of training and you're like, I'm doing great, I'm progressing, this is my sweet spot, then don't just bump that up for the sake of it. Because as we've said a million times, weight training is not about burning calories, okay? Weight training is a specific stimulus from which you want to get a specific response within the body, okay? And we know that to facilitate that response, we need to have certain things available, i.e. energy, i.e. protein, and carbohydrates to fuel that. Okay, we need those things there. And if we don't have enough of those there, then yeah, we can go in and hammer ourselves in the gym, but we're not going to be able to adapt quite as well. and you could potentially even see greater amounts of muscle loss, because if you are training beyond your kind of capacity, beyond what you can adapt to, then you are still, inducing this increase in muscle protein breakdown. So you're breaking down all these muscle proteins and getting more muscle damage, but you're not actually getting enough protein synthesis to override that. So you can end up in that negative protein balance that can result in you losing muscle. So it's just something to consider. If you're someone that's a beginner, then okay, increasing your training might be appropriate, because you may have only been doing very little and you're just kind of getting into this. Or maybe you're coming back from a period of injury. Again, it might be appropriate in that context. But I think a lot of people fail to analyze their training, indicators, their key performance indicators, in the way that they do when they're gaining, and that they don't actually try to progress their strength, because they have kind of a psychological association between dieting and strength loss. So as a result, they barely even try. They barely even go into their session and get ready to fucking smash it. Instead, they kind of go in with this, oh yeah, I'm probably not going to gain strength, so I'm just going to get a pump. Okay, and that's why people end up kind of satisfied with their training, because yeah, they're doing 6 days a week, yeah, they're not progressing, but they're getting a good pump and they feel leaner in the gym. So it's like, man, it's probably working. But it's like, but that's not the purpose of weight training. The purpose of weight training is for you to kind of be getting stronger, or at least maintain your strength. Like if you are losing strength, especially if it's significant during a dieting phase, like you would really want to review your programming, because that shouldn't really be happening. So yeah, that's that. And then the next thing after training is sleep. Okay, so again, sleep is one of those tools that maybe you could improve, in that maybe you were sleeping very poorly before your dieting phase, and now you're increasing your sleep to 8 hours per night. It's consistent, it's quality, boom, too easy. Then maybe in that case you could increase your training. Maybe that is one of those tools. But with respect to sleep, sleep has countless effects with respect to fat loss that are going to be helpful. So if you can enhance your sleep, then you are likely to offset some of the negative side effects of dieting. Okay, so whether that is the change in the testosterone to cortisol ratio, whether it is changes in your insulin sensitivity, whether it is general low energy levels throughout the day, or poor muscle recovery, increase in appetite, increase in cravings, sleep deprivation, better sleep, all these things mediate all those factors, which can all influence the body composition outcome that you get. Okay, I think hunger is the biggest one for people, hunger and cravings, and that when we are sleep deprived, we know that we have greater levels of appetite or cravings, especially for hyperpalatable foods. So you've probably noticed that if you have had a night of sleep loss, you tend to crave things like chocolate, crisps, etc., general convenience foods, as opposed to the foods that you want to eat. Okay, so trying to get those 8 hours per night is incredibly important for successful fat loss, both from the perspective of ensuring that your body composition outcomes are actually favorable, in that it is fat loss and not muscle loss you're getting, because there are studies to show that people who are restricted to 5.5 versus 8.5 hours of sleep per night lose far more muscle and far less fat for the same amount of actual weight loss. So it's not just about the absolute weight loss, so you have to keep that in mind. So I think we've talked about sleep a lot of times, and I think you're probably convinced that you should do that, especially if you're trying to diet and offset some of those negative side effects. The next one would be to try and, I'm actually going to leave this at the final point, but the next one would be to manage your stress, but also get your fucking life together. Okay, this is really important. My most successful dieting phases, and the most successful dieting phases of people I know and my clients, are always coming at times when people just have their shit together. Whether it's the fact that they have a very consistent routine, they're getting all of their shit done, they're like, Gary, I've got life together, it's like boom, boom, boom. Then they tend to get really good fat loss. And it seems unrelated, but it is, trust me, it is so related, okay? Whereas people who are stressed, and I don't just mean stressed in the perspective they're doing a lot, but I mean stressed in the perspective of they're stressed because they don't know where they're going in life. They're stressed because they have a lack of direction. They feel like they have a lot of things to do, but they're not getting them done. Those type of people who have that stress and don't have their lives together tend to be the ones that are like, okay, I need to give myself kind of short-term reward. Okay, because all the other people, the people who have their lives together, are out chasing longer-term reward. So they're chasing longer-term pleasure, in that they're investing their energy to get something back in the future. Whether that is related to their career, to their family, their relationships, etc. they're doing all of that stuff, and they're like, they know where they're going, they know why they're putting in this effort, as opposed to the person who's just looking for short-term pleasure, and they're like, you know, oh, I need to eat food because I've got this assignment to do and I don't want to do it, etc. It's like, I actually believe that stress management is not just about relaxation all the time. I often believe that stress management is actually about getting your shit together, getting your shit in order, and making sure that you're getting your shit done so that these residual stressors are not actually around at the end of the day. I think that is incredibly important and something that is really missed with respect to stress management. But at the same time, it still is important to give yourself, you know, that relaxation time, that time doing the things that you actually enjoy. So whether that is getting out for a walk with your girlfriend or boyfriend, whether that is walking the dog, whether it is sitting down with a book for leisure at the end of the evening, whether it is watching your favorite movie, whatever it is, you need to give yourself those kind of de-stressors if you wish to get the most out of your fat loss. But again, I wouldn't get too focused on that unless you have your shit together. Like, I actually think that it's so important, and I honestly think it's one of the best fat loss tools, because when you have your shit together, it's easy to set up a routine. It's easy to focus on what you're doing and the things that you are focused on for the long term, as opposed to getting caught up in the short term, the hunger, the low energy, etc. Okay, so they'd be kind of some of my top tips, both from my own experience with coaching, and obviously the mechanisms. Like, they're all of these things are not just things I'm making up. There are very true reasons why you should try and do all of these things if you are trying to, you know, minimize the side effects of dieting. Okay, like, obviously we could talk about more things, and like, there are some obvious ones in there, and that, like, you probably shouldn't go to an extreme diet, but you guys know that, like, we want to ensure that we do have, you know, sufficient fat in the diet, and I think 0.7 to 1 gram per kg of body weight is a pretty good recommendation, maybe lower in some contexts, but I think, like, that's a good place for most people to be. Protein, as we said, 2 to 3 grams per kilo, and then fill the rest with carbohydrates. Okay, so I think going with that approach, and then allowing your food choices to be dictated by the things that we talked about, but also by preference, is a good idea. I don't think it's an effective strategy to jump right to keto, or jump right to a very high carb, low fat diet, or vegan diet, or whatever it is. It's like, let's just start, get your bearings with the moderate stuff, try and get your shit in order. You can worry about those options down the road, and maybe they'll be helpful for you. So I hope this video was helpful guys. I know it's quite long, but I'm pretty sure it's something you guys can refer back to over time as you do set up your dieting phases, and hopefully keep these things in mind. Okay, so have a great weekend.